Okay, so here is our first PowerPoint on the skeletal system joints. You can see here we've got the patella. The patella is in the middle. This is our knee joint. The femur, so this is the very bottom of the upper leg bone, the femur here. And we've got, you can see the lower leg bones, the top of them here as well. So you've got the tibia, and here's the fibula just on the side here too. And that's the knee joint. We then just go through the 3 different types of joints that we have. So we've got the synovial, which are the freely movable joints, of which most of the joints in the body are. We've then got the cartilaginous joints, which are partially movable, which are between the vertebrae, the ribs and the sternum, and the ribs and the vertebrae. And then we have the fibrous ones, which are in the skull, the vertebrae, and these ones are immovable. They hardly move. They don't really move at all. And a little bit more about information about the synovial joint. You can read here. The synovial joint is the whole thing basically. The synovial fluid is there to lubricate. The membrane seals the joint, so you don't have synovial fluid everywhere. And the capsule surrounds the joint to prevent leakage. There's an example there. That's the example is elbow or knee joint, and it's a hinge in the diagram there, and they've got the knee joint there. And then this just goes, a nice little table, very similar to what you've got in your handout, and it just goes through the different types of synovial joints. So you've got the hinge, the pivot, the gliding, the ball and socket, the saddle, and the ovoid. And the best thing to do would be to remember a couple of each. So if you can remember, say, the knee and elbow for the hinge, for the pivot you might want to remember the elbow and the skull. The gliding, you might want to remember wrist and ankle. Ball and socket is shoulder and hip. The saddle being the thumb and the ankle, and the ovoid is just the wrist, and there are several wrist bones which have an ovoid synovial joint. And then all the different types of movement. I won't go through them all, you can read that. And then just a bit more information about the ball and socket joint. There's a nice little diagram there. There's a nice cup where the head, which is in a nice ball shape, fits into the cup of the pelvis. And so that's a classic ball and socket joint. And then of course you've got the shoulder joint as well. But that diagram there is the hip. The hinge joint. The hinge, it's just like a door where you've got one type, it can only go and move in one direction. So it could be at your knee, it could be at your elbow. We've then got the gliding joints, and these ones, they're fairly flat and they rub against each other, and they're, for example, they may be the ones that are in your wrist, and there are lots of ligaments that hold them together that stop them from moving too far apart. If you've ever torn a ligament, you know how much that hurts. And then we've got these pivot joints. So the classic pivot joint is where the skull connects to the vertebrae, and it just allows rotation, so you can turn your head from left to right. And that's the end. There's a couple of little websites that you can have a look at. The BBC one is interesting, but it is pretty tough, but it's worth a look if you're interested in having a bit of an extension.